Welcome to Heartfelt Revenge Stories, the night my appendix ruptured. I had $43 in my checking account and a 4-year-old asleep in the next room who needed someone to be there when he woke up. I called the 2 people I had been quietly holding up for 7 straight years. My father hung up after 4 seconds. My mother sent a text. 1 sentence. Not our problem tonight. I lay in that hospital bed in the early hours of the morning, and 4 in my hand, the October dark pressing against the window, and I made a decision that changed everything. Not just for me, but for every version of the story my parents had been telling behind my back while I was still signing the checks. 2 weeks later, someone knocked on my door with something I was not expecting, and everything I thought I understood about my own family collapsed in under 3 minutes. But let me go back. Because to understand what happened at that Christmas party in December, in a room full of 30 people who had only ever heard one side, you need to understand what the previous 7 years actually looked like. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Claire Brennan. I am 37 years old. I am a 3rd grade teacher and a single mother. And what I am about to tell you took me years to finally say out loud. I grew up in the kind of family where the word sacrifice was used constantly. My parents, Gordon and Marguerite, said it all the time. We sacrifice for you. We gave up so much. And as a child you believe that. You absorb it like water. You carry it forward into adulthood like it is your job to balance some invisible ledger that only one person can ever see. I became a teacher. I loved it genuinely and completely. 3rd grade. The age when children are just starting to realize the world is bigger than their neighborhood, bigger than their family, bigger than what they have been told. I taught at a public school outside Denver. $54,000 a year. Not a lot, but enough if I was careful. If I did not have other obligations pulling at every single paycheck before I had a chance to catch my breath. My marriage to David was already coming apart by the time any of this reached a breaking point. He worked oil contracts in Alaska. Long rotations, 6 weeks on and 2 weeks off. We were trying to hold something together across a distance that had become so much more than geographic. And I was doing it alone with little Owen, our 4-year-old, and a household that ran entirely on my schedule, my income, and my absolute last drop of capacity to keep every plate spinning at once. I taught during the week. I tutored on weekends. 3 sessions every Saturday at $45 each, just to make up the gap. The gap that existed because every single month, a significant portion of what I earned did not stay in my account. Here is what 7 years looked like in plain numbers. Starting in the spring of 2019, I began covering my parents' rent. They had moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Lakewood, about 20 minutes from me. My father Gordon had been out of steady work for 3 years by then. My mother Marguerite worked part-time at a dry cleaner, but the hours were inconsistent. The rent was $1,450 a month. I covered it every month for 79 months. 79 months. That is almost 7 years of my life. I also covered their car insurance, both of them on one policy. $340 a month for 84 months. When Marguerite needed knee surgery in 2023, the insurance did not cover everything. The remaining balance was $9,200. I wrote a check. And then there was the $12,000. In the summer of 2021, my father called me with what he described as a time-sensitive opportunity. He and Marguerite had found a house they wanted to buy. The price was right, the neighborhood was good, but they needed $12,000 for the down payment and the window was closing fast. He said they would pay me back within 18 months once they refinanced. He said it was practically guaranteed. I did not have $12,000 sitting around. I pulled it from the emergency fund I had been building for years. The account I told myself was for Owen, for a medical emergency, for the kind of thing that comes out of nowhere without warning. I wired the money on a Tuesday in June of 2021. I have the confirmation email. The subject line I wrote to myself that day said, "House deposit as discussed." 18 months passed. I asked once. Gordon said the refinance had not gone through yet. 24 months passed. I brought it up at Thanksgiving. Marguerite said the timing was not right. After that I stopped asking, not because I had given up, but because every time I raised it the conversation ended with me feeling like I had done something wrong by bringing up my own money. And I was so tired. So deeply tired of feeling wrong for asking for what was mine. So I did what I always did. I absorbed it. I added another tutoring session. I bought Owen's sneakers on sale. I told myself it would work out somehow. What I did not know then, what I would not know until October, was where that $12,000 had actually gone. I want to pause here for a moment, because I know what some of you are thinking right now. Claire, how did you not see this coming? I hear you. I really do. But when you love people, when you are raised to believe that family is everything, you give them the benefit of the doubt long past the point where a stranger never would. You make excuses for the people who made you. And that is something I had to unlearn the very hard way. Now let me tell you about my brother Kevin. He lives in Florida. He moved there in 2019 and has been a pleasant, distant presence ever since. He calls on birthdays. He sends cards. He does not send money to our parents. And somehow no one in the family has ever seemed to notice or mind. I used to tell myself Kevin had his own struggles. Maybe he did. But looking back, I think the more honest thing to say is that Kevin was not close enough to be useful, so he was simply allowed to be loved. I was 20 minutes away. I was the resource. For 7 years I was the resource. And I want to be very clear about something. I did not give out of fear. I did not give because I expected gratitude in return. I gave because they were my parents and they needed help and I was in a position to give it. That was a choice I made with my eyes open. What I did not choose was being the only one. What I did not choose was the way they talked about me when I was not in the room. That part came later. Stay with me because what happens on the night of October 3rd is the moment everything changed. I need to ask you something before we get there. Have you ever been the one in your family who always shows up, always covers the gap, always finds another way? The one who everyone knows will handle it because you always have? If that is landing somewhere deep for you right now, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. And if you are not subscribed yet, please do it now because what comes next, the hospital, the 4 seconds, the text message, and what I found when I finally looked at the bank records, it is going to land very differently if you have the full picture. I had been the dependable one for so long that I had forgotten to ask what it was costing me. On a Friday in early October, I got home from my last tutoring session around 7:30 in the evening. Owen was already in pajamas. I heated up leftovers and let him watch 30 minutes of television before bed. He fell asleep by 8. I remember standing in the doorway of his room, the blue nightlight casting a soft glow over his face, and thinking, okay, another week done, we made it. At 20 minutes to 8, I felt the first twinge. Low on the right side. Sharp enough to make me stop mid-step. I told myself it was a cramp. I took ibuprofen and sat down. By 8:15 the pain had doubled, then tripled. I was sweating. I could not find a single position that made it stop. I had dealt with bad cramps before. This was different. This felt like something tearing from the inside. My very first thought was not the pain. It was not myself. It was Owen. I called Lisa Crane, his daycare teacher. She had given me her personal number at the start of the school year for exactly these kinds of situations. She answered on the second ring. I told her what was happening. She said, "Where is Owen right now?" I told her he was home asleep. She said, "Call me back as soon as you know more. I will be ready." That was the first call I made. The second call was to Gordon. He picked up on the second ring. I told him my side was in severe pain, and that I thought I might need to go to the emergency room. I asked if he and Marguerite could come over and be with Owen in case I needed to leave. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I want a quiet weekend, Claire." For seconds. That was how long I was on the phone with my father before he hung up. I sat with that for a moment. I told myself I had misheard. I called Marguerite. She listened and then she sighed. That particular sigh I had heard my entire life. The one that said I was being inconvenient without her having to use a single word. "Just call a babysitter," she said. "I do not know why you always do this." Then she hung up. Her text came in at 23 minutes past 8 that evening. "You should have planned better, Claire." I looked at that sentence for exactly 2 seconds, and then I did something I still cannot fully explain. Before I called emergency services, before I did anything else, I took a screenshot of that message. Some quiet, clear part of me knew I needed to keep it. That it needed to exist somewhere outside my own memory. I called for an ambulance at 8:51. By then the pain had spread across my entire abdomen. The paramedics arrived at 9. I gave them my medical history, answered every question, and then I called Lisa back from the gurney. I told her I was going to the hospital. I told her Owen was home alone. She did not hesitate for even half a second. I know someone, she said. She has worked with children for 9 years. I trust her completely. Give me 20 minutes. The woman she called was Rosa, 44 years old. She arrived at 9:28. Owen did not wake up. Lisa stayed until Rosa was settled and the door was locked. She did not have to do any of that. Nobody asked her to. I went into surgery at 10:15. The last person I spoke to before the anesthesia was a nurse named Gail, who asked if there was anyone she should contact. I said no, because I did not know yet. I did not know what I was about to find out. I woke up at 5:47 in the morning. The room was quiet. October light was just beginning to come through the window. I lay there for a moment, not moving, just taking stock. The 4 in my hand, the pull across my abdomen, the particular silence of a hospital at dawn. I picked up my phone. 17 missed calls. Lisa, Rosa, 2 colleagues from school, my neighbor across the hall. Nothing from Gordon. Nothing from Marguerite. 1 text from Marguerite, sent at 11:23 the night before. Hope the surgery went okay. I read that sentence 3 times, and then I opened my banking app. Hope the surgery went okay. Not I am on my way. Not I am so sorry I was not there. Just hope. Like sending goodwill to a distant acquaintance who had mentioned they had a dentist appointment. I set the phone down. I looked at the ceiling for a long time, long enough that the light in the room shifted slightly, the October morning coming in slow and pale through the hospital window. Then I opened my banking app. The scheduled transfer was still there. $1,450 set to go out automatically on the 1st of every month, the way it had for 79 months without a single interruption. I had never missed a transfer. Not when I was sick. Not when David left for Alaska. Not when I had $43 left to my name after the rent had gone out. I canceled it. For the first time in 7 years, I pressed the button to cancel it. Then I found the car insurance. I called the automated line. I requested that Gordon and Marguerite be removed from the policy. It would take 30 days to process, but it was done. I sat in that hospital bed, for in one hand, phone in the other, and I made those decisions in near total silence. No anger. No tears. Just clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes when something finally stops pretending to be something it is not. I was discharged the following afternoon. When I got home, Rosa was there. She had stayed. No one had asked her to stay an extra day, but she had, because she said Owen had seemed unsettled and she did not want to leave him with a rotation of strangers. She had cooked. The kitchen was clean. Owen's laundry was folded neatly on the couch. And Owen himself was sitting on the floor in his blue pajamas, the ones I had bought at Target the month before, coloring in a book, completely unaware that anything had been wrong. Rosa looked up when I came through the door. He had oatmeal this morning, she said. He asked for you twice. I had to turn away. I stood facing the wall and I breathed. Just breathed. Because a woman who had never met my son before Friday night had stayed through an entire weekend to make sure he was okay. And the people I had written checks to for 7 years could not drive 20 minutes. In the days that followed, I rested. Rosa came back twice to help with Owen. Lisa dropped off dinner on Sunday. I spent a lot of time at the kitchen table going through files I had not opened in years. I pulled up the wire confirmation from June 2021, $12,000. Then I pulled the county assessor records online. Public information. Anyone can look it up. The house Gordon and Marguerite had bought in Lakewood. Purchased August 2021. Sale price listed. The down payment on record came entirely from their savings account. No portion of it matched the $12,000 I had sent. The money had gone into Gordon's account. But it had not gone to the house. I sat with that for a very long time. Then I called Kevin. He picked up on the 3rd ring. I told him what I had found. He was quiet longer than felt comfortable. Then he said, I knew about the debt from a few years back. Dad had a problem for a while. I thought it was handled. I did not think he had gone to you for it. A pause. I am sorry, he said. I should have told you. I thanked him. I hung up. And at 2:14 in the morning, one hand still bruised from the 4-line. I typed an email to myself. The subject line said, "For the record." 612 words. Everything I knew in order with dates. On October 14th, 11 days after the surgery, Gordon called. The automatic rent transfer had not gone out. He did not ask how I was. He did not mention the hospital at all. The rent transfer did not come through, he said. Is something wrong with your bank? I said no. So what is going on? I am still recovering, Dad. I hung up. Marguerite called 40 minutes later. I did not answer. She left a voicemail. Claire, your father is worried. Call us back when you are feeling better. Not one word about October 3rd. Not one mention of the surgery of Owen, of any of it. I saved the voicemail. I need you to stay with me right here, because what I am about to tell you in the next section is the part that made the room tilt under my feet when I first heard it. The part one had not seen coming at all. On October 21st, there was a knock at my door. And what the person standing on my porch told me that afternoon, what my own mother had said about me to 30 people while I was still recovering from surgery in a church room over coffee, while I was figuring out how to button my shirt without pulling my stitches, that is the part that made me reach for the gray folder. If you are watching from somewhere that feels familiar to this story right now, drop your city in the comments. You are not watching this alone. And please subscribe if you have not yet, because part 3 is where everything turns. On October 21st, there was a knock at my door. Lisa Crane was standing on my porch with a small paper bag, a cup of coffee, and a receipt she wanted to return to me. The taxi she had taken with Owen the night of the surgery, $23.50. She had paid out of her own pocket and had not said a single word about it for 18 days. She handed it to me and said, I do not want this back. I just want you to know I kept it because what you did that night, making sure Owen was okay before you went under, that was extraordinary. I wanted to say that to your face. I told her to come in. We sat at the kitchen table. And that is when Lisa told me something that made the floor feel unsteady beneath me. She told me she attended First Grace Community Church, the same congregation Marguerite had been part of for years. She told me she had been at the Sunday morning gathering on October 12th, 9 days after my surgery. She told me what Marguerite had said. Marguerite had described me as ungrateful. She said I always made everything a crisis so people would feel sorry for me. She said I had money for a babysitter, which meant I clearly did not need my parents. She said the whole situation had been completely blown out of proportion. And then she said something to a group of 6 women sitting at that table that Lisa had written down in her phone immediately afterward. I do not know where we went wrong with her. Lisa showed me the note on her phone. The timestamp said 9:52 in the morning. October 12. I looked at those words for a very long time. I do not know where we went wrong with her. While I was in that hospital bed. While I was making decisions about my son's care from the back of an ambulance. While I was waking up alone in a recovery room with 17 missed calls, and not a single one from my parents. Marguerite had been preparing her defense. Was not calling to check on me. She was building a story and she was telling it to anyone who would listen before I ever had the chance to say a single word. Then Lisa told me one more thing. She said Marguerite had mentioned, almost in passing, that David had called from Alaska after hearing about the surgery. Marguerite had apparently shared this as evidence that the family was caring and connected. But Lisa had noticed a detail that Marguerite seemed to think was completely unremarkable. Marguerite had taken David's call. And she had told him I was fine. That Owen was with family. That I did not want to be bothered. I went very still. She told him I did not want to be bothered. Lisa nodded. I had woken up alone in that recovery room. 17 missed calls, none from my family. And somewhere in Alaska my husband had called, had tried to reach me, had been routed to my mother instead, and had been told to stand down. After Lisa left, I called David. He picked up immediately. Did you call my parents the night of my surgery? He said yes. He had heard from a colleague who knew someone at my school. He said he had called Marguerite because he did not want to panic me if I was already in surgery. Marguerite had told him I was fine. That Owen was with family. That I did not want any fuss. She had made it sound like I had everything handled. Like calling me would just stress me out more. I told him I woke up alone, David. There was no family. There was a stranger who stayed because she was kind and a daycare teacher who paid for a taxi out of her own pocket. That is who was there. The silence on his end of the line was the longest 11 seconds I have ever sat through. I am sorry, he said. I should have called you directly. I did not know. He sent a text after we hung up. I screenshotted that too. I spent the next week building the folder. I printed the bank statements. Every transfer. Every month. 79 months of rent. 84 months of car insurance. The $9,200 from Marguerite's surgery. All of it on paper in front of me. I printed the June 2021 wire confirmation. I printed the county assessor record. I printed Marguerite's text from October 3rd, timestamp visible. I printed Lisa's note with her phone timestamp. I put it all in a plain gray folder. No label, no title. Just the documents in order. And then the Christmas invitation arrived. Part 3 is where I decide whether to go. And where Lisa asks me a question in my kitchen that I already know the answer to. A printed card. Actually formal. Gordon and Marguerite were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary at Christmas. Party. 30 people. Family and friends. We hope you will join us, sweetheart. I called Lisa that evening. I told her about the invitation. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "Are you going?" I said yes. "Will you come with me?" She said yes without hesitating. Over the following weeks, the folder sat in my kitchen drawer. I did not add to it. I did not look at it every day. I just knew it was there, the same way you know where your keys are even when you are not thinking about them. I went back to school. My students made get well cards that my colleague had kept for me, 22 of them in crayon and marker, decorated with lopsided hearts and drawings of apples, and one very ambitious attempt at an ambulance. I sat at my desk before the school day started and read every single one. Marguerite called twice. I did not answer. Gordon called once. I did not answer. Marguerite sent an email. 3 paragraphs about how worried they had been, and how much stress the family had been under. Not one word about October 3rd. Not one sentence about the surgery, the missed calls, the text she had sent while I was in the back of an ambulance. I read it. I filed it in the folder labeled for the record. Kevin called on a Saturday. We talked for half an hour. It was the first real conversation we had managed in years, the kind where you are not performing and neither is the other person, just 2 people on the phone being honest about something they should have talked about a long time ago. He said he was sorry for staying distant. He said it had been easier that way. I told him I understood. I meant it. Owen asked me one evening why we were not going to Grandma and Grandpa's house for Sunday dinner anymore. I told him we were taking a little break and that sometimes that was okay. He thought about that for a moment and then asked if we could have pizza instead. I said yes. We had pizza. He got sauce on his chin and did not notice for 10 minutes, and when I finally pointed it out he laughed so hard he nearly fell off his chair. I sat at the kitchen table and watched him laughing and thought, okay, this is still here. This part is still good. I want to stop here for just a second and ask you something. If you had that folder in your drawer, those 79 months of transfers, the assessor record, the screenshot, the timestamp, the voicemail, if you had all of it in order in a room full of 30 people who had only ever heard one side of the story, would you walk into that room? Or would you let it go and just live quietly with what you know? There is no wrong answer. I am genuinely asking. Drop your response in the comments. And tell me your city, because I want to know where this story is reaching. The night of the party, I parked 2 blocks from my parents' house. Lisa was in the passenger seat. We sat in the car for 8 minutes without speaking. The Christmas lights in Gordon and Marguerite's windows were warm white. The kind that look expensive. The kind Marguerite chooses deliberately. From 2 blocks away I could hear the low sound of voices and music drifting through the cold December air. I was wearing a navy sweater. Marguerite had once told me navy was my color. Lisa asked, "Ready?" I said, "I have been ready for 2 months." The room was full. 31 people as it turned out. My Aunt Ruth, Marguerite's younger sister. My cousin Pamela and her husband. 4 members of Marguerite's church group. Friends from the neighborhood. And Kevin, standing in the corner with a glass of water, who looked up the moment I walked in and held my gaze for 3 full seconds before looking away. Marguerite saw me from across the room. She smiled. Then she saw Lisa standing beside me and something crossed her face. Quick, barely there, gone in half a second. The quiet calculation of someone who suddenly understands the evening is not going the way they planned. She recovered immediately. "Claire, sweetheart," and "Lisa, how wonderful." Her voice did not shake. But I noticed she did not come toward us. For the first hour I ate. I made small talk with Pamela's husband. I admired the Christmas tree, which was genuinely beautiful. I watched Gordon refill glasses and laugh too loud and never once look in my direction. Marguerite worked the room telling the story of their 40 years together. The ups and the downs. The way families come together and hold each other up. The women from her church group nodded. Ruth smiled warmly. Everyone in that room had already heard Marguerite's version of Claire Brennan. I sat at the far end of the room with Lisa and I let them have that hour. And then Marguerite picked up her glass and tapped it with a spoon. The room quieted. She said she wanted to say a few words about family. About the love that sustains a marriage for 40 years. About sacrifice. About showing up even when it is hard. And then, whether from nerves or confidence or some failure of self-awareness I will never fully understand, she said. And we hope our children know how much we have given up for them. Ruth started to clap. Lisa stood up. Lisa stood up slowly. No drama. No raised voice. She simply rose from her chair in a room full of 31 people and said, "Marguerite, do you mind if I say something?" The room went uncertain. Marguerite's smile did not move. Of course, Lisa. What Lisa said next, the documents I set on that table one by one, and the question I asked at the very end that made the room go completely silent, that is part 4. And it is the part 1 have replayed in my mind nearly every single day since December 20th. Lisa spoke clearly and without a single hesitation. She said she attended First Grace Community Church. She said that on October 12th at the Sunday morning gathering, she had sat at the same table as Marguerite. She said she had listened to Marguerite describe me as ungrateful, as dramatic, as someone who manufactures crises for attention. And then she said she had heard Marguerite say something that she had written down in the parking lot immediately afterward. Here Lisa held up her phone. Not reading from it. Just showing it existed. I do not know where we went wrong with her. She said she had written it down right after. The timestamps at 9:52 in the morning. October 12. The room was completely still. Marguerite said, I did not mean it that way. Lisa said, I wrote it down right after Marguerite. The words are exact. Marguerite turned to me. Claire, tell them I did not mean it like that. I picked up my water glass. I took one sip. I set it down. Then I opened the gray folder. October 3rd, I said. 9:13 in the evening. You should have planned better, Claire. I looked up. This was sent while I was sitting in the back of an ambulance. The room did not gasp. It just stopped. Every conversation, every clink of glass, every ambient sound gone, as if someone had turned off the volume on the entire evening. I set that page aside. March 2019 through October 2025, I said. $1,450 a month. Rent. I set a page on the table. 79 months. I set another page down. Car insurance. 2 names on the policy. $340 a month. 84 months. Another page. Marguerite's knee surgery 2023. $9,200 after insurance. I looked around the room. I was not reading to wound them. I was reading because for 7 years these numbers had existed only in my bank account and my silence. And silence, I had learned, is something other people feel. Gordon said, this is not the time or the place. I said, you sent the invitation. He did not say anything else. I set the next page down. June 14, 2021. $12,000 wired to your account. For the house down payment. I paused. I pulled the county assessor record and set it beside the wire confirmation. The down payment on this house is listed as coming entirely from your savings account. No portion of it matches the $12,000 I sent. Marguerite's hands were folded in her lap. She was looking somewhere to the left of my face. From the corner of the room, Kevin stood up. He did not speak. He just stood. It was the only thing he needed to do. Marguerite's eyes filled. She raised one hand to her mouth. The trembling lip, the glistening eyes, the gesture I had watched redirect 100 conversations. The one that historically moved attention from the accusation to the accuser. The room would look at Marguerite and feel uncomfortable. The room would want the discomfort to stop. But this time no one looked away from me. Pamela pulled her purse onto her lap. Ruth had stopped nodding. The women from the church group who had heard Marguerite's version of this story over coffee 3 months ago sat perfectly still. I set the last page down. Not a document. Just a question. David called from Alaska the night of my surgery, I said. He called your phone, Marguerite. He was worried. He wanted to know if I was okay. I waited. What did you tell him? Marguerite said, I told him you were fine. You told him I did not want to be bothered. He has the message. He told me himself. I looked at her steadily. I woke up alone in the recovery room. The nurse asked if there was anyone she should call. I said no, because I did not know that David had already called, and that you had sent him away. The silence in that room was complete. I closed the folder. I did not take it with me. I stood up. I looked around once at Ruth, at Pamela, at the women from the church group who had heard Marguerite's version of this story over Sunday morning coffee. I looked at Kevin, who gave me the smallest nod I have ever seen from another human being. I said, Merry Christmas. Then I turned and Lisa followed and the door closed behind us. Gently. The way you close a door when you know you are not coming back. Outside the air was cold and clean. The Christmas lights were still warm in the windows. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and breathed it all in. My phone buzzed. Kevin. I should have done this years ago. I am sorry. I did not answer right away. I just looked at the house one more time. And then I got in the car and drove home to Owen. I need to stop here because I want to ask you something that I have been thinking about ever since that night. Is it brave to walk into a room like that? Or is it just necessary? Is there a difference? I used to think those were the same thing. Now I am not sure they are. What I do know is that for 7 years the story being told about me in rooms I was not in had shaped how people saw me, how I was treated, what I was given and what I was denied. And on December 20th for the first time I was in the room. Tell me what you think in the comments. And if you have been in a room where someone else was controlling the story about you, I want to hear about it. Drop your city, drop your story, and stay for part 5 because the morning after Christmas is the part that matters most. The practical consequences came quickly, and without ceremony. The car insurance expired in January. Gordon called. I did not answer. Marguerite called. I did not answer. The rent, $1,450 a month, was now their full responsibility. These were not catastrophes. They were just the ordinary adult weight of paying for your own life. The weight I had been carrying for them for 7 years. But part 5 is not about any of that. Part 5 is about a pale blue January morning in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, watching the light come up over the backyard. And the question my 4-year-old asked me that I did not have to think about before I answered. Marguerite sent an email in January. 3 paragraphs. No apology for October 3rd. One lengthy attempt to explain that the $12,000 was more complicated than I understood. I read it once. I filed it in the folder labeled for the record. Pamela sent a text. She said she had not known. She said she was sorry for only ever hearing one side. I replied thank you. That was all. One of the women from Marguerite's church group, a woman named Caroline who I had never met, sent a message through Lisa. She said she wanted me to know they were thinking of me. That felt like enough. Ruth did not reach out. I had not expected her to. Kevin called on a Saturday in January. We talked for 45 minutes. Owen sat on my lap for part of it and called him Uncle Kevin for the first time. Kevin laughed. A real laugh, surprised and warm, the kind that comes out before you have a chance to manage it. I thought maybe we could actually build something here. From what was left. David and I spoke twice more. Neither conversation was fully resolved. He asked once if we could really talk, not about logistics, about everything. I said not yet. But maybe. And I meant it as honestly as I could. Some doors do not close all the way. They just stop swinging. Now here is the part one need you to really hear. It matters more than the confrontation. It matters more than the folder, the receipts, the look on Marguerite's face when she realized Lisa had been in that room the whole time. The morning after Christmas, I woke up early. Owen was still asleep. I stood in the kitchen and made coffee and watched the light come up slowly over the backyard. The January sky in Colorado is a particular kind of pale blue. Cold but clean. The kind of sky that does not make any promises but does not take anything away either. I stood there and I thought about the 7 years. Not with anger. Not anymore. Just with a clear-eyed acknowledgement of what they had actually been. I had given genuinely and with full intention. I had written those checks because I believed in showing up for people, because I had been raised to believe that family is a commitment that does not come with conditions. I still believe in showing up. That part of me is not gone. I do not want it to be. What is gone is the belief that showing up for the wrong people is the same as being loved. Tell me in the comments. And if you have dealt with something similar, share your story. You are not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. On the first Saturday of the new year, I did not have a tutoring session. For the first time in years, I did not need the money the same way anymore. Owen and I made pancakes. He got batter on the floor and on his shirt and on my arm and on the imaginary dog he had apparently decided we now owned. He laughed until he was completely out of breath, the kind of laughing that little kids do where their whole body gets involved and they cannot stop even when they try to. And I stood at the stove watching him and felt something in my chest loosen that I had not realized was still tight. Rosa came by in the afternoon with a bag of oranges and no particular reason for the visit. Lisa texted to ask if we wanted to go to the park that weekend. Owen looked up at me at some point in the middle of all of it and said, "Mommy, are you happy?" I looked at him for a moment. "Yeah, buddy. Think I am." And I did not need to check whether that was true. For 7 years I believed that if I gave enough, showed up enough, stayed quiet enough, eventually they would be there when I needed them. That the ledger would balance. That being the dependable one would make me the protected one. I was wrong about that. But I do not regret being the person who shows up. I just learned, finally, at 37 years old, in a hospital bed with one hand on an 4-line, to stop showing up for people who had already decided I was not worth the trip. You build family. Sometimes you build it with the people who share your blood. And sometimes you build it with a daycare teacher who pays $23.50 out of her own pocket on a Friday night, and does not say a word about it for 2 weeks because she did not want you to feel indebted. Sometimes family is a stranger named Rosa who stays through an entire weekend, because a little boy seemed unsettled, and she did not want to leave him. The gray folder is in my desk drawer now. I am not going to need it again. But I keep it there because the truth was spoken out loud in a room full of witnesses. And it exists now somewhere outside of silence. And that is enough. Have you ever been the one who always shows up, always covers the gap, always finds another way? And then one day realize the people you were doing it for had never once planned to do the same for you? If this story meant something to you, please hit the like button and subscribe. There are more stories like this one coming. And if you want to keep watching, the next one is linked below. Take care of yourselves. The gray folder stays in the drawer. But I walk lighter now. And if you are in the middle of that kind of silence right now, carrying a weight that was never supposed to be yours alone, I hope this reminds you of something simple and true. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to let the ledger be exactly what it actually is. You are allowed to walk out of the room.